Well, my camera ran out of space, and I really don't even know where I left off, but it's probably a good thing. How much time can you spend on talking about the government? But this is part 2. And I really wanted to, basically, my whole point of making this video, which will be in 2 parts now, was not to try to say that everything's just fine. And it's definitely not to say that everything is corrupt. It's a matter of seeing corruption where it is, analyzing it, and using our intelligence as individuals, as communities, to decide what we think we should do about it. And we, the people, feel like we've lost all sense of power, and we not only that, but we're so busy fighting amongst ourselves that we can't even see that many of the people that we're arguing about don't even have our best interests at heart. That, you know, for example, Trump, people want to vote for Trump because they say it's something different from politics. But all I can say is I totally agree with that aspect of it. But on the other hand, he's a complete imbecile. He treats people with disrespect, and he cares too much about what people say about him, going on Twitter rampage at 3 in the morning. And I was thinking about this, like, a lot of folks may not see that aspect as being a bad thing. They may say, well, he's defending himself, you know. To me, that's like a teenager who's been picked on, who's, you know, sitting there trying to defend himself by, you know, texting at 3 in the morning to somebody who is being mean to them. That one aspect of him shows me that he's not a fit leader because he's too afraid of what people say about him. That's a big thing to me. An important thing about being a man, and in this world, I guess if you want to use the term man, I don't like that because it insinuates that it's just men who have this problem, which it's not. Plenty of women involved with the same issue. But the idea of, I think, being a man is to not give a shit what people are saying about you. In other words, we should care if people are saying things that are not true, and we should care if people are saying things about us that are, you know, detrimental or hateful. But if people are telling us things that are true, or if people are telling us things that are just so ridiculous that they're not even worth defending, then there's a certain psychological aspect of humanity that causes us to want to defend ourselves. Now, I'm using Trump as an example because there are entire organizations or governmental agencies that operate on this same shallow behavioral pattern, that the people, let's say a group of people, start resisting the FDA because of a decision they made. And so rather than them working with the people, they give you the hand and say, tough shit, you know, we don't want to hear it anymore. That's the decision we've made. And this is what's happened, is that we've become separate from our government. We are not allowed to make any real decisions. We're not allowed to really express our opinions. And I don't mean we're not allowed to, because here I am doing so. And the one thing I'm grateful for is the ability to be able to say what I want when I want. And while a lot of people talk about, you know, how free speech is edited in this country, and that people are, their videos are removed. I mean, yes, there are people out there who don't want certain things said, but generally, unless you're a person who has a lot of, influence, nobody's going to care. Nobody cares about the average YouTuber who's talking about the government or a particular organization, because they have so much power that they just don't need to worry about what people think. Now, this is the biggest problem that we face right now, is that our representatives in all nations don't give a shit about what the people think as a whole. And it's not because they're careless, it's not because they're heartless, where some of them are, absolutely, but it's because power in numbers allows us to come together and fight things that are unjust. And in the same way, power in numbers for many government agencies allows them to close themselves off in their little cabinet and have their echo chamber where they can argue or agree with each other and start to assume that their opinions are the only one that matters. I mean, if you go back to many tribal ways of living, you have the medicine men or the elders, the council of elders, where people can go and they can explain how they feel, but that the elders have the most experience and that they're able to make a better decision. In our nation, this is the same reason why we've always said that, always desired an older president. It's not that they're old white men, it's not always been about that. It's about maturity. It's about knowledge, it's about life experience. But unfortunately, a lot of these people who have this life experience, their experience has taught them that all that matters is getting ahead or being right. And it's difficult for a person with values to live in a country or in a world where it seems like so many people just don't care. I'd like to say that all the toys that we've created and all our inventions give us this idea that we're somehow advanced, okay? And while we may be advanced technologically, we are way, way, way under the par for where we should be as far as caring about one another and the future. And some of the claims that people make, about, things being false just so they can contain, such as global warming, people will argue very strongly on both sides of it. But still, a majority of scientists, I think it's like 98%, agree that we are contributing to global warming. Yet there are people who say that they're all bought off, that they're all paid off. And this is where this is how a lot of people think. They think that everyone who has an opinion that doesn't agree with theirs is somehow paid for, bought off, or a liar. And I can't blame people for thinking that, because there are a lot of liars and there are a lot of people who are bought off. But not everyone is. And there are still people out there that care. And so, maybe I'm a romanticist with the idea that we can still have a little bit of faith in one another and our future. But this means that we have to hold people accountable who make bad decisions. And this means individuals need to be held accountable. And I don't have an answer to how this can happen. I think part of the problem is that we're allowing corporations to become people. And when corporations become people, then they have a vote. And this is what happened in the Citizens United, where they are now, basically suing the government, to allow unlimited donations to, by corporations to candidates. And it's just lunacy, If we were to take all the money and set it aside, which the money doesn't exist, the money's just a delusion. We're printing more money every day, but it has nothing to back it. And it's causing inflation. So people like you and me have to pay more for our food, services, and, it's just the world we live in. What do? I don't know. I don't have a solution to the problem. I just like to try to analyze it as much as possible, because if you're wise, you will be mentally prepared for any future that may come your way. That means you can have as much food and ammunition and water supply and an underground bunker as you want, but that's not the solution to the problem. Just continuing living after a disaster or an apocalypse, that's not what the goal is here. The goal is to stop it from occurring in the first place. But at a point you kind of realize, no matter what we do, we've set something in motion now that is, self-perpetuating, if you will. That as long as people are born into wealth, then they will continue to think that they're separate from the rest of the people. And this is why I have a huge problem with a billionaire running my country. This is a person who has absolutely no idea what the average person goes through. This is a person who could talk big about healthcare, but do you think he really cares? He can get anything done he wants. Only the people who have truly suffered and seen what it's like to take pop cans back to the store just to buy some food, or, had their house foreclosed on, or kicked out of somewhere because of progress, These are things that don't happen to rich people, okay? And maybe that's shallow on my side to say I don't want a rich man running this country, but that's my true feeling and opinion, is that this is a person that does not relate to the average American, or anyone for that matter. But it doesn't matter if they relate, because if you have money, you can buy yourself anything. And there's only one thing that you can't buy, and that's respect. So I'm very careful with where I put my respect and who I respect. I never respect a person just because they have wealth. I never respect a person just because they have a good job, and definitely never just because they look a certain way or because they make great art or great music. The arrogance that takes over people is what is causing the problems. And we forget that we're just humans. That, like I said, we're advanced in technology, but that doesn't mean that we really have any actual, in other words, our brains have not adapted to the technology. We can't even handle what we do have. We're distracting ourselves with movies, with cell phones, and people buy into it. And this is why I can't blame the corporations for causing many of these problems, because when you go look at a line of people waiting outside the iPhone store to buy the new iPhone, all I think of is, what a bunch of idiots. Like, do you really have to have the newest device? I mean, what, did the last one, iPhone 6 just came out, what, a couple of years ago, last year? And then these people will say, oh, but it has a different camera, or, you know, some different hardware in it. Point being that if you want new stuff, that's great. But these people are buying it because they're told that they need it. And this is what happens everywhere. You know, we as people have to decide what we want to purchase. And our purchasing power determines who has the most money, okay? And that means that we stop buying fast food that has poor practices, you know, or that we stop burning more oil than we need, or get a more fuel efficient car. I'm not saying these are the particular things. I'm saying each person finds what they can do to help. And for some people, it's as simple as learning to recycle. Like, I talk to a lot of people who are very, very environmental, and everything they do is, you know, for the earth. They don't drive and all this. And I talked to one person, and they're like, well, but I don't recycle. And I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, you don't recycle? Because I recycle everything. But they have things that they do. They have their part. Not everybody is going to fulfill every expectation of every other person. And you look at the big picture, and recycling might not matter for shit. Really might not. From what I understand, a lot of the bags that get recycled just get thrown away in landfills anyway. And the power and you know, gas required to drive around and pick up all this recycling, you know, it all adds up. We're trapped. We're stuck. We want to do something as a society, as a group, and we want to move forward in the future, but we don't know how to do it. And so we separate from one another because our ideas of how to get there are different. And that's okay. We just have to learn to discuss it without calling each other's idiots and cunts, but it's really hard not to. Sorry to use the word cunt, but, you know, I get called that by people who don't like an argument or a discussion. I'm like, oh, thank you for the maturity level, you know. But this is the problem, is that we're fighting amongst each other and not fighting the right problems. And that's because we don't know any better. We can't attack the problems. We can only attack individuals that we see and know and talk to. And, you know, I've talked with several people over the years about, you know, moving out and starting our own community. Recently talked to one of my subs last month about this. He wanted to start a small kind of community with, you know, their own power source and whatnot. And I've actually been fascinated with it for a long time. My brother and I were talking the other day about, you know, going in on some land. Here's the problem, is that you still have to pay land use taxes. You're still part of the system. And this is something I learned in 98 or 99 when I traveled, looking, or it was like 97. My buddy and I drove to Montana to look for kind of lands to escape, you know, whatever apocalypse might come. And then realizing that there is no escape, that you have to face it head on. You have to be part of it. You cannot escape it. You're always going to be on government land, and therefore you'll always have to pay some funds. But there are ways to get around living in the rat race. One thing I've been researching lately is shipping container homes. It's fascinating. It's quickly growing, and honestly, it's only really been popular for about 10 years. You can buy a shipping container for between $2,000 and $5,000, depending on the quality and size. And you can buy 2 of those, put them side by side, and turn them into a home. You can take it a step further and go underground, which is what I want to do. I'd like to take a series of pairs of those, maybe like 4 of them, and maybe 8 of them, put them underground and start a small community. If you look on YouTube, you can see several videos of people with their small homes, and it'll lead you into people who have built small communities, what they call like earth ships, which are built out of tires, recycled pop bottles, cans, things like that. But they're really well-built homes, and they recycle the water. They use the toilet water, and it goes into a processing, you know, vat that then they use it to water non-food plants. And a lot of the water gets recycled, and the whole system is pretty self-sufficient, and you need very little. Another guy and his wife, they moved in and dug a small trench, put in a couple of them, and buried it with dirt. But there was one guy who lives in Oregon. It just fascinated me. He said 25 years ago he asked somebody if he could build a little hut on their land, and he's lived there for 25 years. and he's switched between like 4 or 5 different little shacks he's built, but he's just lived in this one little spot, and his idea was to live simply. And for a lot of people, that's not something that they really want to do. And this is the part of the problem, is that you don't have to live like a hermit in order to, to help your environment. But if you're out expending extraordinary amounts of money on things that you don't need, then that is contributing to part of the problem. So I guess what I would like to say is that it's okay to have stuff, and it's okay to have a home, it's okay to have a car, it's okay to be part of a society, but we don't have to embrace buying the newest and the best and the latest. Like somebody said, why do people have to buy a new car every few years? Why do people lease cars? It's selfishness. It's, I want to look good, or else I want to have something that... The excuse I hear is often, well, I like the new car smell, and I like it, I like to know it's dependable. Well, all the cars I've ever had are pretty old, and they still are pretty dependable. I think it's just a cop-out, because a new car is prestige for people. And there's a difference between buying a $15,000 car that's new and buying a $50,000 car that's new. But we buy according to the money we have, not what we need. So the more money a person makes, the more likely they are to buy stupid things that they don't need, to try to, keep that excitement going, I guess. But it bums me out. It bums me out, not because I think, oh, rich people shouldn't have all this stuff. That's not what it's about. It's about, I wish that they weren't so shallow as to think that they have to have 5 mansions to be happy. Because everybody knows that that goes nowhere. So, all I can do is just give my opinions as a human, and my experience has shown me that not everybody is out to get us. That we do have a possible grim future for humanity, but that we don't have to see it as a negative thing for everyone. Those who have the most to lose will suffer the worst, and that's how I see it. It's like somebody said, well, there's going to be a collapse and that everybody's going to suffer, and somebody said, well, that's what Americans think, if you're living out on the plains and if you're still living in a tribal lifestyle, it might not affect you at all, but the environment will. So if we're destroying our oceans and we're destroying our future of a global temperature that's acceptable, what do you do? It's crazy to think that humans are affecting the planet to the degree that we might not be able to recover from it. Now, the Earth will recover. It's not about saving the Earth. It's about saving the life that the Earth has presented. Not even saving humans, but, I think a species goes extinct every couple minutes on Earth. And it's nothing new. And it's not always our fault, but in a lot of regards, we can look at the scientific data and see that things are exponentially increasing in a bad way towards the demise of this planet because of the way that we're living. And the people who have the most money to spend are making that money off of things like oil. Standard Oil bought out all the smaller companies in the late 1800s, and now, people like the Koch brothers, they rule the world. They steer elections. So if you want to blame somebody, instead of blaming the government or the corporations, you find which parts of the government don't operate like a franchise, which ones are closed and which are ignorant, and which individuals are responsible. Because that's the only thing I can leave with, is that we have to start holding individuals responsible. The Koch brothers have made horrible decisions, and people don't really hold them accountable. They're not spoken of as much as people probably should, because people figure, what can I do about billionaires? I can't stop billionaires. No, you can't stop them, but you can inform other people. And the idea is that there are still folks out there who believe that rich people support our economy, that rich people bring jobs, that businesses that make more, that's a trickle-down economy. Trickle-down economy is a fucking joke. We know it doesn't work. You have to have quite a bit of money to start giving it away. And the more money a person has, the more they tend to hoard it. We know that. So I've seen, that billionaires will still make decisions to, to use money out of, like, charity funds, like Trump did, for his own legal defense, to pay people off. He spent like $250,000 apparently out of this, this supposed charity cause, just because it's easier than spending out of your own money. And, not to go on to Trump here, it's just hard not to talk about him when so many people have defended him to me. And I stand by how I feel. say, if you really think that all of his, all the things that he has planned for this country are really going to do it, that building a wall, militarizing our borders more heavily, all of these things, he talks about how messed up the rest of the world is and how we need to defend against it. What the fuck are we going to do about this problem right here? So, those are my thoughts on that, and I guess I'll talk to you later. Looks like somebody's walking up to my house. Nope. Must have been dropping off a flyer. Yeah. Anyhow, enough rambling. I gotta get some shit done. I'll talk to you.